Today we're going to talk about what is the best option lens for wildlife shooting for the Sony system. And I believe I have the answer right here. This is the Sony 200-600 G lens OSS. For bang for buck, I believe this is the best lens. I've had this now for over 4 months, coming from adapted Sigma 150-600 lens, the sports edition. So this is just my long-term review, I suppose, of this lens, using it for wildlife photography and videography for the last 3 months. Let's jump in and run through what I thought. So this is, like I said, their newest telephoto, super telephoto zoom in the Sony E-mount lineup. It's got image stabilization built in, a function of buttons. You've got custom buttons here at the front, as well as autofocus, manual focus at the front. And then you've got your focus distancing, so if you want to set it closer so it's not going through the full focus range. And then you've got the image stabilization, the optic stabilization, optic steady shot as they call it in Sony, and every company has to have a different name. And then you've got custom settings 1, 2 and 3, which you can custom save certain settings on. So this is from their G lineup, not even their more premium GM lens lineup. And basically this was to fill a hole in the Sony E-mount system, whereas before the longest telephoto was 100-400 GM lens. But obviously there were some great third-party options, one of the bonuses of the Sony system. And they had the lens like I had, the Sigma 150-600 Sport and Contemporary, like a bigger, heavier version, and a lighter, more plasticky, cheaper build version. And then you've got the Tamron as well that offers that kind of super telephoto reach. But they released this to obviously fill that hole in their own native glass, and they released it with the 600mm prime f4, which is a fantastic lens, probably one of my dream lenses, but it costs more than a car. So there's no other option for anyone else but to go for this, really, if you want to stay native with Sony. This doesn't just offer affordability but also versatility, being a zoom, whereas using a 600mm prime you haven't got that versatility of the zoom range, and also movability as well. You know, when you're in the fields and stuff like this, a smaller compact lens, if you like, is a lot more easier to use, especially handheld if you're into that kind of run and gun kind of wildlife shooting. Yeah, this is using the slower motor, the SSM motor, compared to the newly developed XD motor, which you can find in their more premium GM lineup lenses, and the new 600mm prime, which is just even quicker focusing, which is a non-linear linear focus motor on rails, rather than this using more the old school method. But again, this is only been making lenses for 10 years, so it's still a fairly new system compared to other lens brands. So the 11 circular aperture does give you nice bokeh for you bokeh lovers, but in wildlife photography, obviously you're not going to get nice bokehables with lights and stuff behind. It's more depth of field control that I like, and obviously isolating the subject. Obviously it's not going to give you the same control as using like an f4 prime or anything like that, but I had no problem with isolating my subjects, especially when you are have got a zoom that long. You can really compress your images as well, which help it. But if you look in this picture here of these roe deer, you can see that they were quite far apart, these deer, but you're not going to get that foreground or background completely blurred out. You can still see the subject in there. And this may be distracting if you really want to isolate your subject. That's something you just have to bear in mind with a lens like this. Yeah, it's not unpleasing. I like the way it renders the colours on the outer focus areas. I don't think it's too much of an issue, but obviously if you're going to be nitpicking, a higher aperture like an f4, a faster lens, will obviously give you that more control and isolation when dealing with your subjects. I found that obviously with the Fstop, it is a f5.6 to 6.3, but it actually switches to the higher Fstop quite early in the zoom. I think even just before 300 it's going to jump to 6.3, so that's something also to bear in mind. You're not going to get it coming in at like 500, 600, though some people would argue like half a stop, are you going to really notice that much? But again, I do use quite low light sometimes, quite a lot, like these images here that you see that I was early before sunrise, and obviously I'm using the Sony A7R3, which is a higher megapixel camera. I think it's 42.5 megapixels. So you're going to get a lot more noise when you're dealing with that kind of higher megapixel. There's not a lot more you can do really. The Fstop is what it is, and you just have to make it work. Again, new cameras now, you can crank the ISO and get away with it, so it's not the end of the world for me. One of the other benefits with working with this lens, giving you more control of your depth of field, is this. And it is a, I think, 95 millimeter diameter filter thread. Again, it's still a big filter, but at least you can get filters for it. Especially, I'm doing more and more filming stuff, and weirdly here in the Netherlands we've actually had a lot of sunny weather. Sometimes in photography you can just crank your shutter up and that's fine, you can stop the light down that way. But when you're doing video and I'm trying to follow the 180-degree rule, so my shutter speed will always be double of my frame rate, I will get a ND for it eventually, and it's the one thing I like about this lens and I don't like about the lens, because yes, it's great to have a filter thread, but still 95 is big. But when you're dealing with a zoom this big, that's the trade-off again. There's always trade-offs with lens, and that's one of them. My Sigma sports lens, that was a 105mm filter thread. So that thing, you think about buying NDs for that, it doubles in price and also a lot harder to get. Whereas the 95 is still just in that range, so that's an added bonus of it. And then when it comes to video, it means I can allow to use that lower f-stop to create that depth of field while still in video. Now to autofocus, again, this is very subjective, depending on what Sony camera you're using. Again, I'm using the Sony A7R3. Again, this is not going to be highly technical, but this is what I found. In good light, it's very sticky. Lock onto a subject and trucks well in burst fire. I found in video it works well. A lot of my photography and filming is obviously through tree branches, shrubs, a lot of stuff blocking the way of the subject, a lot more distractions in the frame if you like. So then the autofocus does struggle. So a lot of the time I do find I end up switching this to manual focus here. It's a bit of an annoying place to put it. I do struggle finding it sometimes. I know it's the top one, but sometimes it means you have to look away. For example, this here, if you can see here, that I just caught a kestrel hunting and I managed to chase it up to this branch, and it was out of focus while swallowing this mouse or vole, and I actually missed the best bit of the shot. So then I quickly switched to manual, and then when I switched to manual I have focus peaking on and then managed to lock on and get the shot afterwards. But that's something to bear in mind, that it does, when it comes to wildlife, there's no easy way for the autofocus to know. I also found that the autofocus when you're shooting in slow motion in 120 frames, I don't know if it's because it's more data for the lens to then read and then change the focus, but you're doing this track of especially birds, quite small subjects in the sky, and they're tracking quite fast across the frame. If you're doing that in slow motion, sometimes you just see it lose lock for the focus. You can see it in these two shots here, the kestrel and also this crow flying, and there are occasional times where if you look closely where it just loses that focus and then catches on, but again, this is sort of expected, I think, when you're dealing with that higher frame rate. Maybe on a different camera I'd like to try it out, like the A9 and stuff, where the autofocus is a bit better. But yeah, that could be just that, or maybe it is the motor and that newer motor could keep up for those distance. But I have noticed that, especially in slow motion. I haven't really noticed it in 4K, normal 24 frames per second or 25 frames per second. I didn't really notice it on that, but I did notice it when I slow it down. So maybe it is to slow down and your eye notices it as well more. Like I said, a lot of my shooting is through branches and stuff like that. So occasionally I use the flexible spot focusing. I normally have like a medium one, and that gives me enough to it's a bit of a pain and fanning around with the joystick to then get it over your subject to then get focus, and it does mean that I miss some shots because sometimes I don't see it as well. I know they fixed that in the update, you can change the colour of the box, but sometimes when it's bright and it's small in the EVF it's quite hard to see. but I think they've only brought that in for the A9 II and the A9 as an update, and then the A7 R4 I believe you can do that, but they haven't brought it out on the older model, which I wish they did, because that would come in handy. I use that mainly. I use sort of zone focusing when I'm in video. Depending on, it changes. Animal autofocus seems to work sometimes depending on your subject. Again, it's not all Sony cameras have it, mine does. Only lock on, it's not like continuous like in video. But I did get some shots here. The one I explained earlier with the deer, that was actually using the Animal IF, and it did actually lock on that time. But again, this is hit and miss, especially if it's not a contrast scene and it's quite bland, it struggles. But sometimes, depending on the animal, it does work, so that's a bit hit and miss. But obviously great to have. I'd rather have it, and hopefully that will improve as Sony goes on, because it's something that really excites me. You know, animal autofocusing AI, that would be brilliant, make my life a lot easier. So that's a quick overview of autofocus. Also, actually, in low light, I found it does struggle in low light. Again, this may be the lens and the camera, it's hard to say with autofocusing. If you look at this footage here that I'm going to put over of these roe deers, now this is extreme low light. This is me pushing the ISO, and I've treated this afterwards in the edit to try and bring down the noise. But you can see it does struggle to lock on to the focus. Obviously you can see the autofocus jump if you look closely. Again, this may be another time that this will be maybe a time that I will go to manual focus. Talking of manual focus while we're here, it's obviously a bit different on this lens. We have the zoom ring. Let me get the old hood off. So yeah, the manual focus is actually here on this lens, not here. So they've swapped them around, the zoom and the manual focus the other way around. Now it is a focus by wire. It feels confident when I turn it. It doesn't seem to have any lag that I've noticed. And I do like focusing manually. I've worked in the media industry a while, so I normally like filming everything in manual if I can, but then sometimes I do like autofocus. I wish there was like a clutch, like you could just slip it forward and then go straight into manual. Instead of having to look up or feel for this button here, that would make it really handy. As for them being the other way around, I don't mind it at all. I think I actually prefer it. At first I was a bit unsure, having the zoom at the top, but it makes sense because when you're hunkered down lower and stuff, you're using your zoom a lot more than you probably use in your manual focus. So this being bigger and right at the front, it just gives your hands a better place to stay and just gives you that flexibility of framing this shot. And that leads me on to this magnificent zoom ring, and actually probably one of my favourite things about the lens, surprisingly, I didn't think it would be that, coming from the Sigma sports lens, which was a beast, and it was an internal zoom and it's an external zoom, so you really had to twist the whole thing to actually get the lens out. But because this is internal, I think they've managed to make it really smaller, and like it's just literally 200. Oh god, so yeah, it's 200 to then 600, that quick. And when you're doing wildlife shooting, it could be hit. That could be you getting the shot or not getting the shot, because when you're working with a long telephoto zoom like 600 or a prime, it's very hard to find the bird in your viewfinder or something that's so small. So being able to pull out to 200, then quickly do it, and like really quick. And if you get, I got quite good at it, and you just find the animal or whatever you're looking for so much quicker than trying to, you know, look through and find it in so zoomed in. It gives you that option to pull out, then I can go straight in, and then I can go bam in. I've got my custom function key free to crop into APS-C mode, so I've got that, and then my custom 4 mode goes into clear image zoom, and then I can zoom it in there. So I can literally go from all the way out to far in very quickly. A small throw is just coming really handy, and also when like you're on a bank or lower on the ground, you're not twisting your arm. You just can literally do it with 2 fingers and just easily slide from 200 to 600 with ease. So that's a really nice bit about that lens, and actually something that I really enjoy. The sharpness is something that everyone wants to know about, all these pixel peakers. Pixel peepers? pixel peepers and sharpness. Now for me, pretty much all these lenses are sharp now. It's very rare you get an unsharp lens, and I'm not going in and zooming in, but I crop into like 99% of my photos, hence why I got the Sony A7 R3 rather than the A3, because it gives me that more option to crop in post. So this lens on that camera, high megapixel, I can't see any issues with sharpness. It's sharp on the edge of the frame as well. I don't really see any chromatic aberration as well with this lens, which I did a bit on the Sigma 150 to 600. I did notice that. Again, it's an easy fix in post, as that purple fringe and you get everything, especially if you have like a bird with like a bright sunny background, like a white cloud for instance. Sometimes you'll get it, especially on the edge of the branches, and it's a bit of a pain to take out. But this, yeah, not really had any issues that I've noticed anyway. Yeah, the sharpness works well, and obviously it's got OSS, optic steady shot for Sony users, and that just means it allows me to go even to a low shutter speed for low light photography especially. I can really go down and handhold quite comfortably low on this. They always say to do the length of your zoom, so if you're at 600 they would say 600 per second, but I've gone down handheld a lot lower than that and managed to get usable shots, so that optic steady shot does come in handy. And with this lens, that's what I like about the versatility, that I don't always have to take the tripod out on that. I can quite comfortably go handheld all day with this, and it gives me that option. And in video it does seem to work well. The optic steady shot works well. IBIS is not the best on the Sony system, but you can get away with it. Even little handheld shots with this lens, I don't recommend it, but you can get away with it, especially if you're shooting slow motions or hide all that wobble. But yeah, overall that sort of sums up the shot. It's sharp, it's a sharp lens, they're all pretty sharp, so I'm not going to go in and but you can see, let's say there's some of these images here, and these are heavily cropped in and the eyes are still sharp. So I'm very happy with that. As for the edge sharpness, obviously, like I said, all my pictures have been cropped, so it doesn't really bother me. But yeah, that's sharpness as I see it. So that leads me on to minimal focus distance. Now this is the one thing that sort of disappointed me on this lens. I know it's one of the trade-offs for builder designing a lens like this, but I wish it was a bit better. The other telephone, the Sony 100 to 400 is a lot better for this. I think that is like I think it's like 0.9 meters. Whereas this is 2.4 meters you have to be away from your subject. Now it is a pain because I only carry around one other lens, that's the 24 to 105, which I'm filming this on now, which does have more closer focus distancing. When I'm filming, I'm always looking for wildlife content. Sometimes the only thing you can find are bugs and bees and stuff like that, bit of filler. So you want to film it. You can't really without swapping lenses. Now I'll show you some photos here and some video. This was me getting as close as I can, and I've heavily cropped into the photos, and also you can see how far away I am sort of when I'm filming these butterflies, these moths, these longhorn moths I believe they are. And that's just a bit of a pain. I would like to have like even more versatility, because for me that's the one thing I want a lens. I want it versatile. I want it to do not just one job, I want it to do 2 jobs or 3 jobs if I can. Now I know I'm being a bit greedy, but I'd love to have seen closer focus distance in with this lens, just to give me that, bit more versatility. I know I'm not expecting a macro performance from it, but just something I can get a bit closer to, because it was one of the biggest downsides of this lens, and I do end up doing it more than I think I would do it. So let's talk about the build of the lens. Now, I don't like the lens. It's sort of a plasticky, compoundy kind of material. It has got weather sealing in the back, and it's dust and weather resistant, as Sony says. It feels well. I've had it 4 months. I've got no real bumps and scrapes on it. I wish it wasn't white. I don't know why, so I prefer it all black. But yeah, built well. It's got a nice array of buttons all the way around, so even when you're in portrait or landscape mode you can reach these custom buttons, and also gives you plenty of flexibility on the side. Now I wish you can see this, I'm adapting my lens collar for an Arca Swiss plate, Now I wish this had this built in, because it is a pain in the backside. Now, because when you have it on my cheap gimbal, you put it over your shoulder as I'm walking, like as I do, and come across, and then I put it down. This bit is pointing that way, so yeah, that bit's pointing that way and the other bit's pointing that way. It's all wonky, so you have to take it off, tighten it up, and no matter how much you tighten it, I do it 10 times a day when I'm out in the field to tightening this up. So I think eventually I will just get this and, you know, replace this. Luckily, this is the other good thing about this, it's very easy to come off. And I think Wimble or whatever, they do one to go in, and then it just means it's another thing that I don't have to worry about. But that's another thing that annoys me about it. But other than that, the build is pretty solid. You know, I've taken it out in the rain, I've taken it out in sandy places, not had any issues. The lens hood, I don't like. It's sometimes if you don't lock it properly and it doesn't catch like that, you think it's locked, but it's not, it looks locked to the front, but at the back it's not. And then you'll knock it and it will just come off. And it's a bit plasticky, and it just, yeah, not a fan of the lens hood pretty much. And it just, when you pack it up as well here, it just makes it so much fatter at the top, which is a pain when packing. I've got two bags. I've got a, what was it called? Wanderer? Now I've got the Wanderer Easy Access Duffel 40 litre, something like that. And that's in my big bag, and that's when I got like bigger trips, I'll pack everything in, and it takes up a whole cube in there. And then also I've got a smaller douche bag, backpack, I think it's called the backpack, yeah, and that's a smaller backpack, and I can fit that in as well. I have to take off the lens collar, but it's this thing, it just makes it so fat one end, it does get stuck to shut the bag. But I mean, it's small enough that I can pack it away, smaller than the Sigma, and obviously smaller than a 600mm prime, so I can't complain that there, you know, I can fit it in, and it doesn't, you know, it's one of the sacrifices of having a big lens, you need a big bag. I'm still waiting for my Shimoda. I ordered a Kickstarter thing, Shimoda X70, because I was sick of not having a big enough bag. And sometimes when I take a smaller bag, I have to sacrifice putting this lens in, and sometimes I have to sacrifice my my lunch or something like that, because I can't fit anything else in. So I'm looking forward to get that. Hopefully I'll do a review on that as well when I get it. Yeah, as for buttons, I set my custom button here to silent shooting, just in case anything comes along that I don't want to scare, so then I'll go to the electronic shutter button. Actually, this picture here, I used that especially. I stumbled across a road deer in the middle of the path, he didn't see me, and I quickly pushed this and went into silent shooting, took some shots of me. Then he saw me, but he didn't see me because of the noise of the shutter, thank God. And he saw me and then just walked off calmly. But that's another real added bonus, having these custom buttons here. Yeah, I don't use it all the time, but when you do need it, it's you know, it makes up for itself because it's so valuable. Like if you saw a fox or a badger or something like that that's very timid and scared, you don't see it all the time, you can just quickly switch that and boom, you've got silent shooting. So that is a handy little function. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to bring up was teleconverters. Now, can you use a teleconverter on this lens? Yes, if you want, you can, but what I've seen is, I think if you go over higher f-stop, you lose autofocus in the Sony A7 III and R, but if you're using the Sony A9, I think your autofocus will go up a lot higher on the f-stop. So that's something to bear in mind. So you could use a 1.4 and still get autofocus on it. But what I saw, what's his name, Tony North, someone on YouTube, and basically he did a lot more in-depth study on this lens and using teleconverters, and he actually found out that if you crop in afterwards, it's actually more sharper and you get more detail than if you use a teleconverter. So again, that'll save you a few quid, and I was like, that's good enough for me, I'll just crop in post, and then in video I just do my other tricks, like I said before, of the APS-C crop and the clear image zoom. So yeah, teleconverter, I don't bother with them. Maybe if I had an A9, but I think I'm more likely going to use a teleconverter on a lower f-stop, like a 70 to 200, and then make that a 400 f4 kind of thing, gives you more of a prime. That's when I think teleconverters sort of come in handy, whereas when you're talking this length already, you've got plenty enough zoom already. so I don't bother with teleconverters. I've pretty much launched my channel with this lens the day I got this lens. I think the next day I made my first YouTube video. So yeah, hopefully it will last me a lot longer and we can get some more epic shots. I'm still learning every day and trying to put that practice in, and hopefully I can get better with this lens and this kit and get some better shots. But this is just my insight of the first 4 months sort of using this lens specifically for wildlife photography and videography. Now let's go through my pros and cons of this lens. Pros is filter size. Having a 95 millimeter diameter filter thread, very handy, especially if you're like me who likes to dip my toe in video. I even sometimes prefer filming than photography sometimes. There's nothing better than catching animal behaviour in video. And of course, mainly I studied film and TV productions. It was always my dream to become a wildlife filmmaker, not more a photographer. But I dip my toe in both now and I enjoy doing both. Having the filter thread is brilliant. Having 95 compared to a bigger one. Obviously more glass, the more you pay, so that's handy. The other pro is the weight. Now my old Sigma 100-600 sports lens, that was like a tank, and I actually did a hike across Scotland in the Outer Hebrides, walking the whole of the Outer Hebrides with that Sigma lens, and it was a beast and nearly killed me carrying it. So I'm very appreciative to have a smaller, lighter, compact lens, and I think this is what 2.1 kilograms, which I've got here is 4.9 pounds for all you Yankees out there, and it's 318 millimeters long, so I think that's about a foot as well. So yeah, it's smaller, weighs little, and more compact than the other competitors, so that is a pro for me. The zoom ring is also another one, as I mentioned before. Having that small throw and that internal zoom, big plus. Giving it a Benny 2 thumbs up on that. Versatility, being a zoom lens, having that versatility from 200 all the way to 600 is the selling point of the lens, and what makes it so fantastic is that versatility. Paired up with the small throw of the zoom ring, it works really well. The other thing is you don't have to adapt the glass. I'm not adapting Sigma glass, which obviously if you're adapting glass, you've got another, they have the MC11 adapter to make it go from Canon mounts to Sony, and that adds another bit to your lens. The focusing was a bit, I'm not sure, and I did notice again, it could be me being a worse photographer back then, but my photos were definitely softer compared to this, using this lens. And the other massive selling point of this lens and pro is the cost. Yes, it's an expensive lens, but comparing to the competition and other things, you're getting a lot more for your money, and it's an affordable option. I'm glad they did make it a G lens and not a GM lens, and put all the newer stuff in it, because I don't think I'd be able to afford it, and I don't think they would have sold as many. So I'm glad in some ways it's a cheaper version, so I can afford it and use it. Some cons, believe it or not, filter size. I know I said it was one of the pros, but I would love to see what they have in the 600mm prime and other ones, and that's have a filter drop in at the back. Now, there's a lot of benefits doing that. One, you're not going to get glare or weird artifacts from using an ND at the front of your lens. Plus, it's smaller glass, so it means it's cheaper. It just gives you that little extra control. That would be lovely. I dream of the day for all cameras to have built-in NDs, but that would be nice to have that option. So again, it's a pro and a con for me. I'm just fussy and I would like it more. So yeah, the other thing I'd love to have seen a clutch built in onto the manual focus. I think that would make a real big difference, instead of faffing around with these small buttons just to quickly lock on, go into manual and quickly go off. I'd love to work with a lens like that. So that's just a little thing I'd like to see. Yeah, again, Arca Swiss plate, I'd like to see that built into the lens collar. The lens hood, a bit big, bulky, don't really like it when packing, but you've got to have it. Focus distancing, I wish that was improved, the minimal focus distancing, because then it would just be an all-round versatile lens, even more than it is at the moment. that would really be nice. But I understand that when you're designing a lens, especially a super telephoto, there are trade-offs to be made, and that was just one of them. But I'd love to have had that. But that was just sort of my thoughts overall. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you if you stuck around this far of me blabbering on. It's a great lens, and if you get it for the Sony system, I don't think you'd be disappointed if you do what I do, wildlife shooting. Also, yeah, if you like this video, don't worry about liking and subscribing, but you'd really do me a favour if you watch some of my other videos and just tell me what you think, because I'm still new to this and I'd love to hear your feedback and what you thought. I'm trying to always improve. If you watch my latest videos, they're a lot better than the first ones, so they get better in time. But if you have a chance, I'd much appreciate it if you could check them out and let me know what you think. Anyway, I'll see you on the next one. I'm going to go out on location tomorrow, so I'll see you all out there. In the meantime, peace and stay safe and wash your hands, and I'll see you in the next one.
Okay. I think it's about time for me to go in. Like I dive deep. Like I'm last week night with the flow here. Johnny boy, my peeps. I'm an infotainment state. My brain ain't contained. Keeps spilling out. I'm belligerent insane. My drink don't stay in place.
This is them filling their own hole. I do struggle finding it sometimes. It's so much road traffic. Okay, we're getting through it now, people. Things I would like to
come over, she coming. My face be like a couch cushion. Yeah, dig around it. You'll find some real change. I'm so OA.
Oh, the neighbours at F4.
I put that drama behind me. I'm so sweet, face. Got your mama behind me.
It's takeaways mom as well. They're all delivering takeaways like Thai places. They go up and down, up and down, up. Some of my other videos, and just tell me what you think. I'm sick of this car traffic. Will this even work?
Baby, give me my precious. Praise be to Jesus, yeah. Looking good with no shirt and gold necklace. Or is it a crown? Either way down, for Judas the pound. Sorry, didn't mean to piss you off.